We have late word from Los Angeles that TCU has held Georgia to a field goal. It's now 82-7, and they were given a standing ovation for that defensive effort. I know it's.
Boy, you're on a roll with this today, aren't you?
It's a little cheap.
Are we going to take this for the next 4 sections that we do here?
This is going to be all day, Watson.
No.
Let me just ask you this: are we going to hit 100 before you stop?
That's a good question, because only once on the Division I level has that ever happened.
Cumberland.
Do you realize? No.
It was, doesn't it? Did Cumberland give up 200?
Didn't Houston hit 100 against somebody under Bill Yeoman?
Yeah, but I think Cumberland gave up the most points in one game. 222. Yeah. I don't know how you give up 222. Especially in the old days when you weren't passing the ball. I don't know how you do that.
You have to suck on defense. For the next year, we need improvement.
Was George Plaster at quarterback for Cumberland? That was uncalled for.
That was totally uncalled for.
I didn't hear it, but I don't think I want to.
He asked if I was Cumberland's quarterback.
Oh, really?
That's so.
Really? That was a cheap shot.
So let's bring Tony Basilio, Knoxville sports talk show host, to our microphones. Tony, how are you?
I'm doing great, guys. That 222 to whatever the score was in that game, every time I think about that, I always think, what must it have been like to be in the locker room or to be on their if they had a bus back then or their wagon, horse and wagon, what must that have been like?
Well, here's a point to that. Wouldn't 175 have been enough where you would have said, okay, let's just sort of let's call in the horses?
Well, I mean, at some point, I would think you talk about no mercy and hardcore. I mean, what are you doing as an opposing coach?
Watson, like I said, when you get to 175, it seems to me enough is enough. And yet on that particular day, they added 47 more.
I've never been on either side of the 175. I think if I had, there'd have been an ambulance brought to the field. There would have been a coach laid out over on the sideline somewhere.
So,
thank you.
So I want to ask both of you this question. In a day and time where we're trying to sell 12 teams in a college football playoff, was last night a good night for the sport?
You know, George, I think I'll go first. I think if you look at it, I think that the playoffs themselves this year, those 2 games leading up to it, were an excellent advertisement for Give Me More. I think Georgia, when they decided they were dialed in, that was going to happen anyway. And look, in March Madness, there have been teams that were so much better than everybody else that just swept through the deal. So, I would just submit that to you. I mean, Georgia just people had a tendency to not take Georgia seriously as a dynasty type team because their quarterback was so little and so diminutive and didn't have the strongest arm in the world and wasn't a 5-star player and this, that, and the other. And, that was just my sense of that deal.
Watson, do you have any feeling that it was not a good night for the sport?
Well, it wasn't a good night for the sport, but I don't think it'll affect the playoff, the 12-team playoff. I don't. That's what people want to see. We saw it in these bowl games going way down in views, George.
Yeah.
It's the playoffs, and then everything else really don't matter. That's what it's becoming. So you've nearly got to lengthen the playoffs, because if that's what everybody's starting to think, you don't want it to just be 4 teams. You want it to be more. So I don't think so. I think what it did is it's what's going to happen some, and every time it does, it's going to hurt the little guy. Now TCU's not a little guy. They were the Big 12, were the best team in the Big 12, even though they didn't win the Big 12 championship. But these group of fives, one of them gets in, wins one, gets clobbered the next week. They're going to start, and then that fourth team in the SEC makes it to the championship game. It's going to make the Power Five better conferences get more in, is what I think is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing last night helped the SEC big time.
Mm-hmm.
And that would have put Tennessee in if that happened. Tennessee would have still been playing and would have been one of the 12 for sure. That's what I think. I think it hurt the little guys last night. The underdogs will make it harder to get them in when they start picking. The other thing I think is going to happen, Tony, I think all these schools, when the Big Ten and the SEC expand, which is going to be in a year, all these schools' non-conference schedules are going to start being gimmies. They're going to be gimmies. They want those wins stuck in, and then if they go 6-3 in the SEC, they probably know they're in at that point. So I'm telling you what's going to happen. You're going to expand to 9 games in the Big Ten. You're going to expand to 9 games in the SEC. And the 3 games they play outside that are going to be absolute gimmies, which is going to hurt the sport.
You know, guys, I think there's a chance to go to a 10-team schedule eventually. Here's why. It allows you to not share that money. You just hoard that money. And you keep it internal, and you create better matchups for television. And, you know, you were talking about the little guy. I think if they really thought this thing through, and you looked at the ratings for these bowl games, which are actually okay. I mean, compared to the rest of sports on television, there are NBA playoff games that would kill to have bowl game ratings. Really. I mean, if you look at those, if you go and look at it, and I think what the group of 5 ought to do is have their own championship.
That's what I think.
They ought to, and you could gamble on it, which is what everybody does now. You could promote it as its own thing. You could have 2 teams holding trophies at the end of the year. And I think people would watch it. I think people would look at it because it's good, solid football. There's nothing wrong with that level of football, especially if it's competitive. They're playing each other in a 12-team type format. I think that would be a wonderful thing. And I guarantee you they could get a TV partner for it, the way these television partners are climbing all over each other to pay through the nose and overpay for what's out there with college inventory.
I really don't think there's any doubt that's what's going to happen. I don't know how quickly, Tony, but when you keep making these Power 5 conferences deeper and deeper, and who says they're through? It might be 4 power conferences instead of 5 one of these days. The Big 12 didn't help itself last night. There's no doubt about that. But I think you're right on. I believe that all the way through. They're going to end up, and if I'm a group of 5, because the money now differences in the Power 5 and group of 5s is getting out of sight. So it's near going to be impossible to be able to play with them. Money speaks in so many ways, in NIL, in facilities, in paying coaches, every way.
Mm-hmm.
So the group of 5 are going to end up being further and further, talent-wise less. And I think they're going to get to the point where they want their own national championship before it's all said and done. That's where I think we're headed, guys.
And you know, the sad thing is, guys, if you stop and think about it, the Brett Favre's coming from Southern Miss, that's gone, long gone era. Because now, the minute he shows skill, he is immediately picked off that roster. Like, if you're at that level and you're still trying to play those games and play these teams heads up, or you're a young coach trying to make a name for yourself, however you want to put that, you have no chance, because they're going to take your star players and they're going to pick your roster apart annually. And I mean, we don't even need to know this to know that that's what's going on already, Watson, because the truth is, if you're in Division I football and you're in the middle of the SEC and you're trying to get better, you owe it to yourself to pick those other programs apart, almost like a vulture. You're almost not doing your job if you don't do that.
especially Tony with no rules. I mean,
No rules.
They're going to have to find some way to stop the tampering, and I don't know how, because they're the ones that created it. I say they, the NC2A, and they're going to have to find a way to stop the tampering. But you're dead right. A great player cannot stay at Southern Miss, at UAB, or any of them. Pick them. Vanderbilt, maybe. The NIL money, if it's getting to where I hear it is, that it's up into $2, $3, $4 million now. My gracious, I don't know how you stop it. And they're going to have to deal with tampering some way. But how do you say it's tampering now? All these kids are getting agents, and some school calls the agent and says, "Hey, man, I'm telling you now, if he were to just pop up on the screen, we'd probably have about $3 million sitting there." I mean, there's ways to say it, Tony,
without saying it,
and they're going to have to deal. And I've got some thoughts about we'll get into later with George. I want to, but I got some thoughts about the transfer rules. I think there's got to be some heavy rules put on transfer portal. Got to be some heavy rules put on the transfer portal. If you don't, Tony, we're going to end up having about 10 schools, and everybody else is just going to be fighting for their lives. It's going to be a 10 school league of the best. I'm telling you.
You know what's incredible about the transfer thing? There are several guys who have transferred twice now, and nobody's saying a word about it. And you know why? Because the NCAA knows if they challenge that, that'll be one more pillar that falls. So just let these guys go. This, what's the kid's name that went from USC to Georgia to West Virginia, and now he went down to Rice?
JT
That's 4
Daniels.
schools in 4 years.
JT Daniels.
Those of you scoring at home, that's 4 schools in 4 years.
Yep.
And I don't think he's gotten 4 different college degrees. So, I mean, think about that. That guy's making a mockery of this deal.
Tony,
and nobody's saying a word about it, George. Nobody's saying a word about it.
Well, I did last week. I said that he would end up in the Rose Bowl parade, that they would have a float, the transfer portal, and he would be the grand marshal of it.
That's fantastic.
That doesn't say much for
you pulled that one on a day I wasn't on, because I hadn't heard that one.
Oh, it was beautiful.
Oh,
I mean, it is. It's a mockery. 4 in 4 years, and that's okay.
Well,
and that's
guys,
legal.
Think about it. The NFL has free agency. You have to go through your contract to be a free agent. College football has free agency, period. Open season every year. You can't keep doing this. You've got to put some rules in to stop this. And or they're going to ruin the sport. If they don't do something, they're going to ruin the sport. The rich get richer, and for sure now they do. I said it back when Coach Kramer put in the BCS. I said, all this is going to do is the rich are going to get richer. And that's my boss. That's a great friend of mine. But I disagreed with it. And now it's gone from that to what we got, all the way to what we have now. The rich are doing nothing but getting richer. What's the 2 schools that have won back-to-back national championships? Alabama and Georgia. The rich get richer.
Watson, you're asking for the NCAA, though, to proact, and all they do is react.
I know.
In fact, they've needed a football commissioner for about 20 years. And you know what? They won't do it. They still need to do it. They need to take those 5 leagues. They're going to play this Super League football, unite them, put some guardrails on them so that they behave themselves. But it's not only that. The reason salary caps were invented is so these sports could sustain themselves and not eat themselves. If you go back and look at the NBA when they first did it, they told David Stern, "You're crazy." He did it in order to save his league, because those owners and human nature, we are always going to push the envelope. It's who we are as human beings. We're always going to push it past where we should push it. And unless they put guardrails on this thing, this is going to get to be total, complete anarchy. And look, I like player movement. I don't mind player movement. But the playing on 4 teams in 4 years, what are you learning? I mean, if this is like, most of these guys are never going to play pro. What are you learning? You're learning that if things don't go your way, you just quit and you go to the next stop. And that goes for these coaches too, Watson, because I know for a fact, like here locally and around the SEC, they're calling kids in now and they're saying, hey, there's not a spot for you here next year. A lot more than that was ever done before, because now there's not even a rule on how many you can bring in. Now it's just open season. I'm going to cut the world. And by the way, you're in competitive situations. So that's going to happen. I mean, it's really a mess right now. I know we sound like old men, get off my lawn, but they've got to figure out a way to fix this thing, or they're going to really screw their sport up, because people won't identify with college football anymore, because at that point it ceases being college football.
Tony, does the date November 18th mean anything to you?
Not another like anniversary or something I've forgotten. I'm bad at numbers, George.
Okay. Georgia plays at Tennessee. We're about to put up the schedule of Georgia.
Yes.
Yes. I'm assuming that Georgia will get by. Go ahead and put that up there, Billy. I'm assuming they'll get by UT Martin and a few others.
Look, what did I just say? Look at this schedule.
Yeah.
What's Georgia done?
Non-conference: UT Martin, Ball State, UAB, and Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech
has to be. So they did 3: UT Martin, Ball State.
How do people pay for that? Hey guys, how do people pay for that?
Well,
I mean, would you guys pay a nickel to go? I mean, I wouldn't walk across the street to see one of those games.
No, but it may be the threat. For instance, you know, you're asking almost that same question of, okay, I bought my season ticket. Why do I have to pay to be a part of the Tide Pride Club? Well, because if you don't, there's somebody else out there who will. It's a leverage deal, and right now Georgia has all the leverage. So let me ask both of you this. What do you think are the odds they could three-peat? Let's talk for a second about what landmines are out there for them to try to do it a third year in a row.
Quarterback. They got to hit that. Everything else will be there again next year. Quarterback. They've been spoiled rotten here the last few years with Stetson Bennett now, I'm telling you. So
you think they have to go into the portal?
I don't know. But when the season starts, if they're going to win it all, they got to have a quarterback.
They've got a 4 and a 5-star sitting there. What's so unique about that quarterback, guys, is that he beat out several 4 and 5-star players during his tenure that have been sitting there, or that moved out of there when he ascended. And if you look at that, that is the most improbable. But here's the thing. If he had another year left, how many schools in the SEC would take that kid as a starter? Tennessee would. I think Alabama next year probably would. I think LSU probably would. Think about it. You look around the league. The team down there, Florida, is going to have the kid from Wisconsin. I think they would take him. And everybody says he's 5 feet nothing. Tell you what that guy does. That guy manages and wins games, and he makes plays when it matters. He was not very good against Ohio State, but when it mattered, which is what all those really good quarterbacks have the ability to do, when it mattered, that guy led his team down the field and scored. I think people have sold that guy short basically his entire time there.
Yeah.
People hate him. They viscerally hate that guy. And I can't figure out why, because he's, to me, is like the ultimate example of what college football is about. I mean, he's a guy 5 feet nothing, doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, doesn't look like he should be able to do that out there. And people say, well, you know, he looks like this and he acts like that. And I'm going, guy's a pretty good player. And George is really going to miss him next year. I agree with Watson. They're really going to miss him.
Yeah.
Guys,
so
the top 3 teams, George, next year have got question marks at quarterback. Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. SEC is going to start out a little different looking than it was starting the year this year, when all 3 of them had bona fide quarterbacks. And now not a one of them has one. Milton will be the best, but he's not proven by any means. And Alabama and Georgia right now, we don't know. We don't have a clue.
Let me ask both of you this, and then we'll kind of end the conversation. How hard is this going to be just simply on Kirby Smart? The whole, coach, it was great you won 2, but can you three-peat? And, you know, the wear and tear mentally that does to a coach. Watson, let's start that with you.
The wear and tear of when I won a championship and coming back and playing, and the wear and tear of when I had a poor year. There ain't no comparison. The poor year one is a lot harder than the wear and tear on winning a championship. So he's just icing on the cake. He can call it pressure, and it's always pressure. Coaches put more pressure on themselves than any fan could ever put on them. And a lot of people think that's kind of a biased statement. I'm telling you for a fact, coaches put more pressure on themselves than any fan or any program can ever put on them. And I always, when I'd had a good year, it was a whole lot more fun, even though there was anxiety with it, a whole lot more fun coaching that year than it was when I went 3-8 or 4-7 or something. Tony,
you going down the same road Watson did?
Oh, man, I would love to have that guy's first world problems. You know, they're the odds-on favorite. They're the odds-on favorite at plus 250 to repeat as national champion again next year. And the reason that there is they've got a loaded roster. And David Pollock last night was sitting up there with Nick Saban.
Oh,
so, hey, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah,
Saban's sitting there and he's basking in the glow of, you know, being the man, and he's up on stage all day, and he did 10 hours of broadcasting. And buddy, at the end of that, he got the rim shot of all rim shots when Pollock looks right, just with him sitting right next to him, it says, Georgia now controls the sport. I bet you that Saban guy went back to his bed and slept about 5 minutes with that reverberating around in his demented head.
And
I
likely,
guarantee you that drove him nuts last night.
Saban gave him the evil eye.
He did give him the evil eye.
He did. He sure did.
But he also scheduled a staff meeting for this morning at 6 a.m. So anyway, good stuff. Tony, appreciate it as always.
George, are we not going to talk about the Vandy, Tennessee basketball game tonight?
Doesn't deserve to be talked about.
No, just remember this. Remember this. I'm going to lay some good stuff on you here.
Yes.
Under Jerry Stackhouse, Vandy has never won the game. The margin of victory by Tennessee in the Stackhouse era is about 12.5 per game. And yet you can take to the bank tonight after Tennessee mops the floor with Vandy that your guy will come out and talk about just how much he respects.
Great coach. Yep.
Oh, my goodness. I have the world of respect for Jerry Stackhouse. You know why?
Great,
because he's kicking his butt.
Great X's and O's guy.
I love when coaches do that. Hey, when Pitino beat Wade Houston by, what was it, 51 or 61, whatever the number was in 93 before we had the blizzard, he came out and said, I just want to say, you know, I hear the rumbling down there in Knoxville. That man's a great coach over there. Yeah, sure he is, coach. You just beat him by 61 points. You know, the thing I love about Stackhouse, though, which I'm sure you love as well, is he doesn't even play, but yet he leads the SEC in blocks every year. There's never been a coach that goes on social media and blocks people like that guy.
He's not blocking me because I'm not making the attempt.
And I control your Twitter.
Well, that's a second point. Maybe. Anyway, let's put it this way, Tony. I don't see Vandy winning tonight.
Yeah, I don't either.
Yeah.
It'll be. Do Tennessee fans care about tonight, Tony?
The get-in Knoxville is $2.
No way.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a 9 o'clock start though, 9 Eastern, which is that's another thing. Why can't we value fans in this day and age? We're asking more from them now financially than ever before. Can you value fans a little bit? 9 o'clock Eastern start on a winter night?
Let's bring that up next week. That's
you,
a
guys.
topic in and of itself. Tony, thanks as always.
Thank you.
By the way,
Hey,
he's
Tony.
dead on right about that.